I would like to introduce everyone to our fans and finances panel. I think this is going to be a really fun hybrid panel to talk about spaces where people don't think are quite sexy, which is talking about finances. But I think this is a really interesting panel of people that can speak exactly to how sexy it can be. We have Valerie Angulo. Did I pronounce that right? Hopefully I did. From Paper Chain. We have Tom McNeil from Patreon. We have Linda Portnoff from Tangy Markets, and we have Brittany Foreman, who literally changed jobs last week, so I don't actually know where you are now. So how about you introduce the panel, introduce yourself, and with that, take it away.
Thank you. Thank you so much. My name is Brittany Foreman, and I currently work at Acceleration Music, which is essentially helping independent labels scale a lot faster. So I'm really excited to have this panel because I've been working in data and a little bit in the finance side. So I'm really excited to help creators kind of learn how sexy the site is, and also taken from Christine's words, and also the things that are available to them. So I know that we had a quick introduction, but we kind of have some questions for our panelists. So I'm really excited to hop in. And again, thank you guys all for joining, because I know everybody's in different time zones. So we're going to try to keep this as close to on time as possible. So first we have Linda. And I want to give her a little bit more time to tell what Tangy Market is, and also ask her, what piece of advice do you think everyone should take away from this conversation?
Yeah, thank you, first of all, to the organizers. I'm so grateful and humble to be part of the gang here. Tangy Market is a music investment and trading app that we have created to democratize music financing and financial inclusion. The yearly turnover of the music industry is estimated to hit above $100 billion in 2030. But as we all know, financing can be a struggle for a lot of artists, because it can take a long time to write that overnight hit song. So this is the problem that we're trying to solve with the Tangy Market. Takeaway, I think when we talk about data, it's important to remember that today we have a lot of data just like a click away. So there is this massive information, but how to make sense out of data? That's a tricky question for us, at least. So I'm really curious to hear from the others how you deal with this.
Absolutely. Next, we have Tom, who is the Creator Partnerships Manager at Patreon. And again, what do you hope that people walk away from this conversation, that you're just this one little gem? If it's TLDR, what do you want to give them?
Yeah, thanks, Brittany. And hi, everybody. Really great to be talking with you all about such cool things. So yeah, Patreon is a membership platform that makes it easy for artists to get paid. It's a place where we celebrate creative independence and community. And as I think we're all here, we're all music fans. And something that I really love about seeing things come to life at Patreon is that you see music fans move closer to artists. And that's always a kind of thrilling and beautiful experience, irrespective of if it's industry driven or fan driven. So it's very cool to see that happening. And in turn, I think that's such a great question about kind of what we'd all walk away with. I think the thing that just kind of, for me, from a Patreon perspective and for all of our perspectives, that joins everything together is put artists first, put creators first. Whether it's a question about data, whether it's a question about platform, whether it's a question about bringing people together, or equity, or the way that we even talk about art. If we put artists first, then we can't fail. And we'll be on the right side of this incredible second renaissance that we're all getting to experience.
Love it. I love that answer. And last, obviously not least, we have Valerie, who is a data analyst at Paperchain. And you get the same question. What do you hope people walk away with in terms of information today?
Yeah, well, nice to see you guys all again. I'm excited to talk on this panel today. So my background is in computer science, and I always had this hunch that data is really powerful and could be applied to anything. And my experiences so far in being in the music industry, but also at companies that leverage data and music, I've seen how transformative it can be for the lives of artists. And I've seen that tech and music and this intersection is a wonderful like like creation, like some kind of child mixed of like science and art, and it's really awesome. And honestly, data it's so relevant in our world, and it could be used for a lot of good, especially in the music industry.
All right, amazing. So to the people who are tuning in from home that are not panelists, because we're all tuning in from home, if you have any questions, just pop them into the chat and we'll try to get to them at the end. But first of all, this is a question to everyone. What does your day-to-day look like? And essentially, what tools do you use?
Who wants to go first? Tom.
Play rock, scissors. Yes.
Sure. So my day-to-day is working with artists and managers and labels and organizations, helping them to build membership strategies. And what that looks like is both advising people on the particular things that they want to achieve in terms of their creative life, as well as feeding into their wider kind of like revenue streams and kind of like business setup, as well as kind of like reaching out to people and saying, hey, you know, we've seen people do incredible things on Patreon. You seem to be working in the same sort of way, and I think it will be really rewarding for you. Is it something you've thought about? Basically given like a human point of contact on the inside of a tech platform, you know, like, and in terms of the tools that we use, there's a large contingent from our data science team who are at the conference today, and they use far more interesting tools than I do. And kind of like, I'm gradually getting to grips with things like mode and amplitude, and setting up outreach sequences, and joining things up with Salesforce to make sure that our data is being used in a consistent and accessible way across the company. So that's like the inside tool side of things. And in terms of outside tools, one of the things that we're doing is empowering artists to be able to read their own analytics, make strategic decisions on the back of that, seeing what's working, seeing where they might want to pivot. And that's why it's exciting for me to be working on a team which builds tools for artists, because it acknowledges that art is always changing, it's always kind of like moving, and so we want to empower people to be able to make smart decisions in a flexible way. So that's kind of the day-to-day, and those are the tools.
Very cool. Who would like to piggyback on that?
I can go next. So yeah, I'm a data analyst at Paperchain, and basically Paperchain is an instant payments platform for artists, and we want to pay artists as fast as possible. And we use a lot of data for this, obviously. So me being the data analyst on a small team, I wear a lot of hats. I use a lot of SQL and Python as well. But the main things that I do is I use SQL to relay insights that I get from all our data to the business development side, so that they know how much to advance to the artists and the labels. I also do a lot of visualizations with Data Studio. So I know you guys have gotten acquainted with that the other day. Yeah, very nice to have like concise dashboards and stuff, and share a lot of the like revenue information like that way, and like artist stats. And I also like do upkeep on the apps. So we do use predictive analytics because since we're getting daily streams from like Spotify, Apple Music, and other streaming services, we have to price that data so that we can show that revenue and give it to the artist. And yeah, so basically like that's what I do. So SQL, like upkeeping apps, and a lot of like dashboards. Yeah.
Yeah, and for my part, it's funny because like when you start a company like we've done, we thought there was a need for like a stock exchange for music, so we can apply the same capitalistic, if you so want, mechanisms that companies can use to raise money. So I think you mentioned that before, Tom. You have to put artists first. Like if we don't respect the rights of the artist, we risk not having a culture. We don't want that future. So, and in order to get to that place where we have this like marketplace for music, we had to develop all models ourselves, because we need to be able to predict, like you do, Valerie, on a daily basis, to predict the revenue at the level of individual songs. And the tricky thing here is that, so there are tons of models, like from simple time series models, regression models, random forest, all these like sophisticated models that you can use. But the problem is that historical performance is not always a good predictor for future revenue when it comes to a piece of art, because anything can happen. So still, we think that there's a need for some kind of manual work to be done, and that's why I talk about like making sense of the data. You can look at all the big numbers and you can look at the prediction curves, but still you need to take into account a lot of other things, like what's the management team behind this artist, or what's the probability that somebody will pick up this song and make a cover of it. So that's what we work on a daily basis. Interesting question, Brittany. I really like that one. Thank you.
I mean, you guys are ripe for like really pithy, intuitive answers. So I'm trying really hard. It sounds like all of you work in very data-driven companies, which is great, but also maintain that there has to be some sort of like human connection and being able to like look at the data and understand it. What parts of the traditional artist revenue generation do you embrace, and what parts have you reinvented as data-driven companies? We'll start with Linda this time.
You'll have to repeat that question because my son was coming behind. I was just going to tell him not to disturb me. So yeah, sorry, Brittany.
No worries. What parts of the traditional artist revenue generation does your company embrace, and what parts have you reinvented?
Okay, yeah, so we do not like, our hypothesis is that if we can put a song on a market where anyone can be a music investor, you will become incentivized to up that value. So we don't like, we have the revenue from streams, for example, we have the revenue from live, we have the revenue from music airplay, and when music is played on the internet and on television. So all these revenues we redirect through our platform. And then when people invest in these revenue streams, hoping for them to be higher because then they can make a profit out of their investment. That's the way we can increase the value of music. And that's what we think is needed. We really think that a lot of culture is undervalued today because we have very few large companies who have all the power, like in pushing down that value going back to the artist. So we believe that this may be a way for us to help increase the value that goes back to the artists.
Oh, that's amazing. Valerie, since you work in Papertrain, why don't you take a stab at this question as well?
Yeah, so I don't think that we embrace any traditional ways, seeing as we want to pay artists immediately. Usually artists can get paid out like 3 months or later from like streams that have been listened to, and that's unacceptable. We want artists to be at the center of financial power, and we want to provide them their revenue as fast as possible, and that's it. Yeah.
So what you're saying is you reinvented the entire thing. You're just like,
this is it. It's Papertrain. That's it.
Instant money. I love it. I love it so much. Why would an artist or / label seek alternative or faster revenue sources? I mean, I think we all kind of have an answer for this, but I'd love to hear you guys' take on like what would drive somebody to kind of get payouts a little bit faster.
I guess this kind of links into what Valerie's saying in terms of speed and bottom line and managing your own business, whether you're managing as an independent artist or as part of a wider organization, or you're a manager, publisher, songwriter, whoever it might be. Like, we all need to pay bills, and we all need to be able to underwrite our next creative endeavor. And I think especially in music, where the artist is taking on so much personal risk in terms of putting themselves out there and their art, getting not only the artistic validation, but the financial validation can allow you to kind of pay that forward to yourself into your next project and to pay everybody in your team. So I think that's incredibly important. The other thing that I would add to it that kind of piggybacks on the kind of like not just the speed, but also the repeatability. So something that we see in membership is that You know, an artist is able to predict month on month what revenue they have coming in, ideally growing up and to the right. And because our industry is so conventionally being built around like a single product being released, or a tour, or something that has to have like a start point and an end point, it's kind of revolutionary to be starting to think like, how can we actually change this so that an artist essentially has a recurring paycheck in some description, where they aren't vulnerable to like market volatility or what's hot and what's not. You just have your fans who've always been there for you and always will be. So, but speed, I think, as Valerie was saying, is totally key to that too.
Going to keep it moving. This one is for Linda and Tom. What types of fans choose to spend directly with artists, and how do artists find those people?
Yeah, I think you can look across genres and see that some genres are better than others to really have a close connection with their fans. For example, I think the Swedish hip hop scene has been super good at connecting digitally. These artists are young, they know how to use a smartphone in a smart way for marketing purposes, and that has really helped them to be at the forefront in this movement, I think. And thinking about Patreon, the heavy metal kind of rock scene, these guys, usually they are guys, they have super hardcore fans. They can donate so much money for just, you know, a t-shirt to make that, to facilitate their next live tour, for example. I'm sure you can tell me this is true. This is like my idea of who is a typical Patreon fan. So that varies a little bit across genres, I think.
Yeah. Tom?
Yeah, I mean, first of all, great intuition, Linda. Like, definitely see kind of like real rabid fan bases in that kind of like rock and heavy metal genre for sure. The thing though, I would say is I kind of flip the question a little bit. Like, the question we're asking is like, which fans are prepared to pay artists directly? Like, how many fans don't realize that the money that they're paying for a gig ticket or an album or their streaming revenue isn't going to the artist that they love? You know, like I think it took me working in the music industry to realize that when I buy a t-shirt of like Rhiannon Giddens, who is now like on Patreon, that she's not really getting a lot of that money if she's got other people that are kind of like standing between myself, the t-shirt, and her. So I think my general kind of thesis on this is like, music fans have always been happy to have a value for value exchange with the artists that they love. It's just that now we've got tools and kind of like a cultural shift that means that we're able to bring those two people closer together, because fewer gatekeepers are required to do that in the digital age.
Yeah, very good point.
You know, yeah, thanks, Linda. And I think, yeah, the whole panel, like, and I imagine the conference has kind of belief in that. And and in terms of the question of like where to find them, start with a question. You know, if you're starting membership, Rhiannon, just because kind of top of mind, before she started a Patreon, she said to her fans, hey, I'm thinking about starting a Patreon. I've got some really cool ideas. I'm going to do some live streams, going to do some Q&As, going to do some limited edition merch, some really kind of casual hangouts. Would you be down for that? And have you got any other ideas for what we could do? For me, that's like such a healthy way to be starting a new transparent and inclusive venture, to say like, would you be interested in this? And my experience when artists ask their fans, would you be interested in having a closer creative relationship? The answer is more often than not, yes.
Oh, that's amazing and super great. A really great takeaway. Obviously, we all want to make sure that artists can continue making music, because that's what we're all here for. So this is a really good to kind of get into the nitty gritty of like how we have that exchange from like the fan to the artist directly. What insights do you provide to your clients? So this is for everyone. And what insights can they see over time thanks to your platform? A lot of twofers. Sorry about that. Let's start with Valerie.
Yeah, sure. So on the Paperchain web app on our website, okay, let me back up a little bit. So basically we have to collect a lot of data, right? From like Spotify, Apple Music, and all these other streaming services, YouTube. We aggregate that data. We have like the past statements that the artist's gotten, as well as their current like trends that we've priced and show in like terms of money. So the artists and the labels right now too have access to these dashboards where they can see basically all of their finances across all of these services in one place. And I think that's like really important, because if you see how much money that you're making currently, you can kind of plan accordingly for the future. And if you're seeing like the money you made in the past, you can notice any trends, and it probably helps with marketing. So yeah, I just like marketing decisions and personal finances, like where you want to put that money, all useful stuff. Yeah.
It's really great. Tom?
Yeah, totally. So lots of data. The kind of 3 lanes that I think are empowering and important to talk about. First of all, game changing, but it shouldn't be, is that we just share email addresses.
We're doing the answer.
That's a far better point than mine. Far better point. As my colleague was saying, the thing that we get to do is share email addresses with people so that the artist and the fan can have a direct relationship. It's bonkers that other kind of intermediaries are saying, come to our platform, don't worry, we'll look after your fans' data and show them other things. You just keep making your music. So like in terms of like giving them data to who their fans are so that they can own the relationship. And if they want to leave Patreon, leave it and tell their fans where they're going. That's our challenge, is to keep on providing such a good service that they want to stay. It's thing number 1. Thing number 2 is that we just give people data about how their creativity is connecting with their fans. Again, so that they can lean into things that are really working and then kind of pivot on things that might need adaptation. So we give them analytics on the reach and impact of what they're creating in their Patreon. And the third thing, which is, I think, again, the thing that this whole panel is centered around, is finance. So we actually say to people, here's completely transparently the revenue that came through your page, what the platform fee was, what the payment fee were, what your takeaway is. Here's a chart showing you how this is growing over time. Here's a month that you gained or lost fans, so that you can think about how your actions are resulting in impacts. And I think that level of transparency, something that I think we all agree on here, is tremendously important for creating a healthy system where, instead of having gatekeepers who are empowered because they hold the data and don't share it with anyone, we are all empowered because we share the data and can make smart decisions in a healthy environment.
I love it. Linda, do you have anything to add? You're on mute. There you go.
Thank you. Yeah, I couldn't unmute myself. Well, we were so lucky to be able to ride on the shoulders of both like Patreon and Paperchain, and looking at their great inventions and trying to build on it. So our value proposition to artists is that they should get faster payments, they should get better financial control and true independence, not having to sell off their copyright too early to like large music publishers. And with that comes total artistic freedom. Like if you can be really empowered, you also get to focus on doing what you want to do, may that be commercial or not. So yeah, I guess that sums it up for what we're offering.
No, it's great. And now my favorite part is we get to pull out the crystal ball and I get to ask, what do you think the future of the music business will look like in terms of us getting past COVID, diversity, blockchain, as Valerie knows, is one of my favorite things to talk about. And essentially, where are we going next, especially in context of like the finances of the music industry?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know if anyone has an answer to that, but I think just the three of us, like looking at these three companies, that's the direction we're heading. Trying to be humble about this, but I mean, smart contracts, distributed ledgers, blockchain, and all that for sure. Putting the artist first, that's a no-brainer. And also with the pandemic, artists now seeing no revenue from live, and that's the biggest revenue stream. So this challenge of financing, of liquidity, has become even more pressing. So there is a sense of urgency. I think there's a perfect storm for all our companies and other actors in this area. So I think, you know, it was David Bowie who said, "The future belongs to those who can hear it coming." And yeah, I think that the future should be in the artist's hands. That's for sure. That's the most important.
Yeah, and I guess like just like seeing how communities have come around artists.
Everybody can mute, please. All right, Valerie.
Yeah, and that's it. No, I'm just kidding. So just something that I've noticed, especially with COVID, like all the support that's poured in for artists, music creators, and also the spaces that they've started to occupy more, like Instagram Live and like all these other like streaming platforms and things like that. Like that's so cool. I think it's totally gonna stay. You know, after the pandemic, I think that like artists have kind of tapped into this space where they can be more direct with their fans and then get the support they need. They don't have to just depend on a record label or like the traditional means of, you know, like traditional music industry path or anything like that. It's more direct now. Yeah, so I think that's here to stay.
Okay, sorry. What do you see as the future of alternative currencies in this space, and how long do you foresee until this possible integration?
All right, I'm gonna take this one. All right, so regarding Bitcoin, I can't say for sure since it's so volatile, but like stable coins. So what we've been doing at Paperchain, which I've been super interested in, it's like super like on the finance side, is basically like using contracts on the blockchain to fund the payments for the artists for them to be paid immediately. And this occurs, so it's with stable, okay, so the stable coins, they don't change in value, it matches to $1. And also we found that this method's faster than traditional like banking systems, financial services. Like it's more efficient, it's cheaper, and it's just more transparent too. So that's like the future I see. That's the future I see that's going on Paperchain right now. And I think like stable coins and like untraditional ways of doing business are going to be way more popular.
Anybody? Oh, Tom, you're unmuted. Okay. Do you have anything to add to that or to the prior question? I know we were having an issue with the mute button.
Yeah, for sure. It's a lot of people have asked me for a personal mute button, so you've got ahead of the curve there. Yeah, I mean, like in terms of like what's coming next, first of all, I think that we've all seen, or like certainly on Patreon, I'll be interested to hear what everybody else has seen, but in the last 9 months during the pandemic, a real acceleration towards the more kind of like digital first way of kind of like approaching revenue generation. Like I think we had like 100,000 new signups on Patreon in the first 3 weeks of April. And in that period of time, so it took us 6.5 years to pay out our first billion to artists. It's taken us 15 months to do the second billion. So in terms of the way that that's accelerated, I think we're likely to, first of all, see a bit of a deceleration there as people return to prioritizing live touring. Like fans are desperate for live music again, artists are desperate to tour. So yeah, we've made progress, but I think we will probably initially just decelerate. And so it would be on all of us to keep on advocating for that. And then in terms of like what's coming next, what's the future, what's exciting, one of the things I love about, say, like I use it as an example, there are others out there, working at a company that is artist founded means that artistry is in the DNA of the company. Like equitable practices are in the DNA of what we're doing. And I'm really excited for the amount of innovation that is there for the taking between artistic pioneers and tech pioneers and people who are forming partnerships where they say, let's make sure that an artist-led strategy and roadmap is embedded at the beginning, that we're not kind of thinking, I wonder what artists need, but an artist is saying, this is what I need to kind of increase my practice. And technology, I think, has always been an enabler for artists, whether it's the first vinyl or CDs, MP3s, live streaming, and as that's kind of advanced, artists and fans have moved closer together and have been allowed to step outside of the lanes that other people have created for them. So I love that if somebody said, what genre is Billie Eilish? I don't know. I think she's Billie Eilish. I think she's amazing. Like what? And I think we're going to see more of that, like people less kind of living within the schema that's been created by an industry who said, like, we need you to sit in this quadrant, and more artists just saying, hey, I'm just going to do my thing. You want to come for the ride? If so, cool, let's go. And that makes me super excited.
Okay, we have a few more questions. So for our audience, if you have any questions, go ahead and drop that in the chat now. In experimenting, especially with Patreon, with what works best with fans, what methods should creators employ to find the best campaign strategy? And what can be pulled from the data in these instances?
Do you want me to talk a bit about Patreon, Brittany? I don't know.
I mean, in terms of should music creators be A/B testing? Like, what can they take from the data? And you can use Patreon as an example, mostly because that is the experience.
Yeah, absolutely. So yeah, A/B testing, love it. Like, I often see people kind of like launch their Patreons, and in one video they tell people what's on their Patreon, and the other video they share the first 20 seconds of a 5-minute Patreon exclusive, and that's usually the one where people go, oh, you've got my ear. Yeah, I'm going to come and find out what's going on there. So we definitely encourage A/B testing and give them data on our side so they can see the impact of that. In terms of shaping campaigns, the one big takeaway that I would share for people who haven't been a patron of somebody before or who haven't run one themselves is, I think in music, we've got the blueprint for ourselves already, because we know what a stage area feels like for a fan. So like backstage for somebody in the industry is very normal. Like that's where our shows happen. It's just run of the mill. It's a work environment. But we all know what it feels like when you see a family member or a fan come backstage for the first time. Like their eyes go wide. They're like, wow, I've moved closer to where the action's happening. Same thing if you're bringing them into a music studio or on a tour bus or something like that. And I think that when you're planning a campaign where you're bringing an artist closer to the art, just think about the things that an artist may be doing anyway in the process of their creative life that a fan wouldn't usually see. Bring them into that, give the opportunity to see a different perspective, because especially for super fans, that's something we already know works in the kind of the analog world. And this is just about creating a digital version of that.
All right, and using the term campaign loosely in terms of if they want to get financing on Tangi Market, like what data can they use to kind of find the best way to attract more investors?
Yeah, I think the most important thing that they will have is a transparent market price of their asset, like their music copyright asset. That is something that back in the day used to be decided by two corporates doing a deal. There was a trade going on of music copyrights in boutique finance shops, and then there was Mercuriadis coming along with Hypnosis and offering deals to the most iconic songwriters. And we kind of want to offer that to any artist and any fan to be able to invest into their favorite music. And when they do that, they put a price on the share that they want to buy. So this is worth 10 to me, or this is worth 12. I can sell it 15. So it's sort of like a Robin Hood thing, but with music. You get it. So what happens then is that you get this market value, which, yeah, the bet is that it will go up when we use the power of the fans.
That's really great. Let's see. In this context, how can one use data, like in the context of finance and like financing music? How can one use data most efficiently, and how can we make that actionable?
Yeah, I mean, I touched upon this before, you know, but I think that like, so my background is in accounting and finance, and a lot of times people are a bit skeptical to like, what can you actually learn? Because the financial reports are always dating, you get the numbers for the past year or the past month or the past whatever. And so you get past data information. It's very hard to do predictive analysis. It has been up until basically now, I would say. But even though we can do this predictive analysis, it's still, you know, you can never exactly pin down what the worth of a song, for example, will be. So yeah, that's, I think that's worth pointing out.
Absolutely. Valerie, we haven't called on you in a while. How can we use data to be more efficient, and how can we make it actionable for music creators?
So I think like to do that, you'd first have to set out a question. So our question, or something that's relating to all of us, is that we want to give more power to artists, want to empower them. And you can look at the ways that you're doing it. So we're talking about finances. Besides paying them, you know, as fast as possible, I guess like if you think about like services, other services that they would need, you know, let me take let me let me go back a little bit, because I deal with the financial data and streaming data, so I can only really see it in the lens of like paying them as fast as possible. But there's so many data sources out there. Yeah, like I'm not even sure like the sources past the finances, you know, but if you want to utilize data, it's always good to approach it like with this one question of how you want to use it. And that makes it's very straightforward. It's not like you're looking around in the dark to try to solve like a bunch of like undefined questions like, oh, this is the purpose I want to use it for. Let me specifically try to tackle this with what I have.
Just to piggyback on that, Valerie, I think it's such a great point about like helping artists ask the right questions of this abundance of data. My first job that wasn't a bar job was working at what was then called a web analytics company in 2005. This is before Google Analytics came out. And we thought that our service was going to be giving people data about how their online advertising was performing. But that wasn't what people wanted. They didn't want reams of data. What they wanted was advice. What they wanted was for somebody else to take a look at it and say, based on what you've done here, we think that you should invest here, pull back here, pivot there. And I think that that's one of the interesting things. Like right now, we're talking about data availability, which is great. But I know, say, for instance, from a Patreon perspective, 3 different artists could be trying to do 3 totally different things. One of them could be trying to just drive a campaign where as many people sign up as possible so that they gather email addresses and can pull that into the next album campaign. Another one could be entirely financially driven for the long term and it's got like a long kind of like up and to the right game plan. Another one could be trying to finance an album that they need to invest in right now, so they should have like a more kind of truncated, accelerated timeline that they're working towards. We can tell them how each of those different things are doing on the basis of data, but without them currently asking us or knowing what they're asking themselves, they might end up seeing the wrong answers. So I think that one of the things that we can most do to empower artists with their data is to help them navigate it. So kind of like Valerie, as you were saying, in terms of, even just thinking about how it all fits together, saying like, okay, step one, let's put all the data in an accessible place. Step two, let's help people use it.
All right, pause. That was a lovely silence. So those are the ends of my questions. I haven't seen any questions in the chat, but we're also almost out of time. So closing statements, if anybody wants to, I guess, promote being a data analyst or an accountant moved over to the music side, or essentially anything you want to say, now's the time. Thank you guys so much for letting me moderate this and ask you guys probing questions about like what you think about music and finance. My name is Brittany, and you guys can take it away.
Well, if anyone is interested in data and music, you should totally, like, there's so many different data sources too. It doesn't even have to be in finance per se, but if your passions are data and music, there will be like 100% a niche that you will find that, yeah, will be awesome. So keep on exploring. And I hope that like you guys like learned something new today and were exposed to, possibilities in the industry that you didn't know of before.
Yeah, my first encounter with music and data, I think, was through Christine, the organizer of this whole thing. And I can just say, if you're interested in data and music, make sure to connect with her. Just stay around her, because great things happen in her circle. So yeah, that's the tip from me.
Yeah, just such a pleasure to be involved in this conversation. And I think that actually this is such a great model for how we can behave as an industry, just sharing perspectives in a really collaborative way. The music industry has been very hostile in various previous incarnations, and it's really, really wonderful for Christine to have demonstrated to all of us what we can achieve when we actually work with each other. If anybody wants to ask me a Patreon-shaped question, you can email me at tom@patreon.com. And I just wanted to say, yeah, thanks so much to everybody for making this so wonderful.
All right, that's it. I'm going to hand it back to Christine. Thank you guys so much, and thank you to our panelists.
Thank you guys so much
Take care.
for
Bye.
rounding out our day. Appreciate it. It's lovely to see you all. I think some of you guys